Hello, thank you for joining me here today at Why the Book Wins, where I compare books with their movie adaptations. My name is Laura, and today I am talking about Call Me By Your Name by Andre Aciman, released in 2007, and I am comparing it with the movie from 2017, directed by Luca Guadagnino. And this is yet another subscriber request, so this was suggested by two people, Alex King 5742, as well as Lucy Lioness 100, and they are the two who officially requested it, but there were other people who were definitely interested in commenting that they were excited about this one. So I hope you all enjoy this video, and be sure and share your thoughts on this book and movie down in the comments. And this is the coming of age story of Elio, a 17-year-old who has a summer romance with Oliver, a 24-year-old who is staying with Elio's family for the summer to assist Elio's professor father. And I will begin with a spoiler-free book and movie review, beginning with the book. So this book had some of the most beautiful writing I have read all year long. It was just so poetical and so deep and insightful and profound. And plot aside, I would recommend this book to people simply for the just magnificent, evocative prose of Andre Aciman. But then even with the plot in mind, I did enjoy the story itself. But the first half, it was a lot of just Elio longing for Oliver, and he just kind of goes on and on about the crush he has on this man. And so even though the writing was beautiful, it felt like that kind of dragged on a bit too long in the first half. And then later on, there is also a segment with this writer they go see who is having like a reading, and then as he is with his friends, this writer is sharing a story from when he went to Thailand. And maybe I'm too dense to understand the significance of this, but I personally was not getting why we were being told this story, and I didn't see how it related to what's going on with Elio and Oliver. But all in all, this was still an amazing book that I would highly recommend. It just felt like a very real, mature, human love story, and it reminded me of the movie Past Lives. Like specifically the end part of Call Me By Your Name, the book, reminded me of the movie Past Lives. And yeah, it just felt like a very intimate, real look into love and relationships. And while I do enjoy the more generic romance from time to time, this is one that I would recommend to people even if they don't like romance, because again, the writing was so beautiful, but also this isn't a generic romance story. It was something deeper than that. And I think it's something that, again, it's a very human story, so I feel like a lot of people could relate to it. And then as far as the movie goes, a lot of what makes this movie great comes right from the book, and so much of the dialogue is verbatim, straight from the page. And then also the book and movie both just have such a vibe and such an ambiance to them, and the world we see in the movie, similar to the book, just felt so real and so lived in, and I loved being in this world and this atmosphere for the duration of this movie. And the casting is spot on, and then the cinematography is just beautifully shot. So yeah, if you have not yet seen this movie, you definitely should. This was my first time watching it, and yeah, it was fantastic. And from here on out, I will be getting into the details of the plot, which means there will be spoilers going forward. So to begin with just the basic overview of Elio and Oliver's relationship. So in both, Oliver shows up to Italy where Elio lives, and he is going to be there for 6 weeks because each summer the father has a new assistant come in for the summertime, and so this assistant gets the benefit of experiencing Italy while also working with Elio's father. And so Oliver is a 24-year-old professor, but 24 seems young to be a professor, so maybe he's kind of like the teacher's assistant professor kind of a person. But regardless, he is the assistant they choose to come help the dad out. And Elio starts to have a crush on him very soon, which also in the book, we hear at the end, we hear about when they chose their summer interns kind of a thing. We hear about that and how Elio saw Oliver's picture, and so it kind of happened even before he even met Oliver. We don't get that in the movie, but yeah, we hear about that at the end of the book. But regardless, he starts to form a crush on Oliver very soon and becomes obsessed with him before finally telling Oliver how he feels in a kind of a roundabout way. And then the two of them end up kissing, but Oliver tells him that they can't go any further than that. And then one night, Elio has sex with a friend of his, Maurizia, and then the night after that, he and Oliver end up sleeping together for the first time. And after the first time, the next morning, Elio has this self-loathing and disgust with himself. However, they sleep together again, and after this, it seems like the self-loathing only happened after that first time. And this aspect of the story is one of those things that I also just felt was very real and accurate, and again, one of those things that make it not just the generic romance, because yeah, the fact that he feels such self-loathing afterwards and feels so conflicted, and he wonders if he feels this way because Oliver is a man, because he'd had sex with Maurizia the night before and he didn't feel this, and so it has him like questioning himself, and you could wonder if it is caused by his own maybe repressed homophobia to some extent, because this does take place in the 80s. So maybe he had these influences from the world he was living in, even if he wasn't conscious of it at the time. So like that could potentially be something. But I think this is, again, part of that human experience, whether you're queer or not. I think this is something people experience. But I also wonder if the age difference has anything to do with why Elio feels this way, because with Maurizia, they were both teenagers, right? They're the same age. Whereas Oliver is a grown man, right? And so maybe something about that dynamic also had something to do with the way he feels. I would love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments, but specifically in the book, Elio thinks that it is because Oliver is a man and that's why he feels this way. But anyway, so initially he has this self-loathing, but then they get together again and then all is well and the two of them have this relationship. However, near the end of Oliver's stay, he goes to Rome in the book. I forget what city they go to in the movie, but Elio goes with him. And so they have this great weekend together before Oliver then has to get on a train to go back home. And to talk about Elio, I did find him more likable in the movie. And that's not to say I disliked him in the book per se, but I just felt more attached to him in the movie. And I think it's partly just Timothee Chalamet's performance. He just was so good and so charming and sweet. And he also comes across as so young too and naive in a lot of ways. And yeah, I just liked him so much. And there's so many like little moments in the movie, for example, when he drops the book in order to wake Oliver up. And then another part when the door slams when he's with Oliver, and the way he silently freaks out at the door slamming. And then the part where Elio is hanging out and Oliver comes up asking what he's doing, and Elio says he's thinking, and Oliver is like, "What are you thinking about?" And he's like, "It's private." And just so many little moments like that weren't in the book, that were in the movie, that just, again, just felt so real, and it made me like Elio. In the book, because this is narrated from his perspective, again, the first half is just him and his fantasies with Oliver and the longing he has for him and his desire to control him in a sense. Like he fantasizes of Oliver dying for one, but he also fantasizes about Oliver like being paralyzed and in a wheelchair, and how he would love that because then he would always know where Oliver was and he would have control over him. And just this infatuation he has with Oliver went on for a while, whereas in the movie, you know, we didn't get inside his head. And so even though they show the obsession he has with Oliver in the movie, it just was even more intense in the book. And then also in the movie, Elio is a virgin up until he has sex with Maurizia, whereas in the book, I'm pretty sure he had sex before. Like he came across very adult in the book in a lot of ways. For one, like I said, I don't think he was a virgin, but also he is socializing with adults all the time. And in the book, we hear that his parents like try to encourage him to make friends, but he's just more of an introvert. But because his parents, who they are, and they're always hosting people, he's always interacting with adults. And then also the drinking age is lower in Italy. So he's able to go to bars and drink and be in these adult situations. The US teenagers drink, but they have to sneak it, right? And they can't be in bars. And in these adult settings, they're not allowed. And so the fact that he's able to be in these adult settings also just made him feel like more of a grown-up. And his parents don't really give him any rules or restrictions, and so he has free reign to do what he wants. And so yeah, he just came across as very mature in a lot of ways, although his obsession, I think, kind of reflects his age and also his lack of confidence. Whereas one reason he likes Oliver is because he's so confident, because he's a grown adult and he's kind of gone through all of these phases that Elio is currently going through. But anyway, so clearly he's younger than Oliver in the book, but at the same time, he came across as older than he did in the movie. We also have a part in the movie where he's like cuddling up with his parents and they're reading him a fairy tale. And then Timothée Chalamet, he also just looks really young and really petite. And so he just came across as younger in the movie for so many different reasons. But to go along with Elio's age, so I read that the age of consent in Italy was 14 or is 14. And that is something to keep in mind, right? Because Elio is 17. It's the summer before his senior year, so he's still a high schooler, whereas Oliver is 24. But yeah, technically, I guess like it's fine for Italy rules, but even in America, you know, 18 is the age of consent. And I think that's crazy young, right? Like if you hear of an 18-year-old being with a 30-year-old, that seems really weird. But yeah, that's just my personal opinion. But it was weird at times, especially in the movie, like, because like I said, Timothee Chalamet he's 20, but he came across as so young in this movie. And then Armie Hammer is clearly, you know, like a man. And so yeah, it did feel weird at times. And I've heard people say that it really turns them off to this love story because they're like, oh, like it's a grown man and a high schooler. Like it's just weird and uncomfortable. And going into this book, I thought it would be a story of Elio being like taken advantage of and used by this older man who then casts him aside and forgets about him. And that's what the heartbreak would come from. So ended up being surprised that the book and movie take the route of seeing this as a beautiful romance between these two. And ultimately, I do like that they take that route and that, yeah, it is just a beautiful love story about two people who don't end up together. And so I did like that. But at the same time, I can understand people who are just like, who feel it's a little icky. I mean, 17 and 24, that's like 7 years apart, which again, that's not a huge age gap. But when the young person is still a high schooler, that's what makes it weird, right? So let me know your thoughts on this aspect of the story down in the comments. I saw people on Letterboxd who gave this like 2 stars because they're like, oh, I just couldn't get over the age difference. That Elio is still a high schooler and Oliver is a 24-year-old professor, right? That's a huge maturity level difference. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments. But in both, when they sleep together for the first time, Oliver says to Elio, call me by your name and I'll call you by mine. Later in the book in particular, they talk about how Elio and Oliver, but Elio just really wants to be one with Oliver, you know? And so they wear each other's clothes, they call each other by their names, and they just do these things to help them feel like they are one. And then later on in the story, when they are older, we read, it would finally dawn on us both that he was more me than I had ever been myself, because when he became me and I became him in bed so many years ago, he was and would forever remain, long after every forked road in life had done its work, my brother, my friend, my father, my son, my husband, my lover, myself. In the weeks we had been thrown together that summer, our lives had scarcely touched, but we had crossed to the other bank where time stops and heaven reaches down to earth and gives us that ration of what is from birth divinely ours. We looked the other way. We spoke about everything but what we've always known, and not saying anything now confirmed it all the more. We had found the stars, you and I, and this is given only once. And in that last phone call in the movie, they call each other by each other's name. And this is also how the book ends, where they're parting ways. And Elio is thinking how he hopes that Oliver, when he says goodbye, that he will call him by his name. But yeah, to talk about that phone call, in the movie, it is Christmas time, so like 6 months have passed, and Oliver calls and he tells them that he is engaged. And then from there, Elio, we see him looking into the fire as he just kind of processes this information and thinks back on the relationship he had with Oliver. And it's such a great scene too, because Timothee Chalamet, this camera is on him throughout the duration of the credits, so it's a number of minutes. And yeah, Timothee Chalamet was nominated for his performance here, and I totally get it, because again, he just really embodied this character and brought him to life and just brought so much personality to him, and he was so charming and likable and sweet, but still, again, so young and naive, and just, yeah, he was just fantastic in this. But yeah, in the book, Oliver actually comes to visit them, and this is when he tells them that he is getting engaged. So he tells them this in person. And then from here in the book, we read about the interactions they have with each other through the decades. And at the 15-year mark, so 15 years since they were together, Elio goes to visit Oliver, and Oliver invites him back to have dinner with him and his family. But Elio tells him how he's still not ready to see Oliver with his family. And they both talk about how the lives they live almost feel like a coma or like a parallel life to the life they could have lived had they stayed together. And then Oliver says how one day they can be two old men reflecting back on themselves, but they'll be talking about them as if they're not themselves. If that makes sense. I'll share the passage that he says. And on that evening, when we grow older still, we'll speak about these two young men as though they were two strangers we met on the train and whom we admire and want to help along. And we'll want to call it envy, because to call it regret would break our hearts. And wow, that last line in particular, man, like those are some of the lines this book has where it just really hits you. So yeah, just amazing writing. And yeah, this aspect of it is what reminded me of past lives in a way, when you're with someone and you kind of see the life that you could have led with them. And so again, feeling like you're living these parallel lives. But I need to talk about the scene in the summertime after Oliver leaves to go back home because his 6 weeks are up, and Elio comes home and he's talking to his father, and his father gives one of the best monologues dialogues ever written. And what he says in the movie comes straight from the book. So this is all thanks to Andre Aciman. And he tells Elio how like you should cherish what you and Oliver had. And you might want to numb the pain, but don't, because when you numb the pain, you numb so many other feelings as well. You numb the good as well as the bad. And then he goes on to say, in my place, most parents would hope the whole thing goes away or pray that their sons land on their feet soon enough. But I am not such a parent. In your place, if there is pain, nurse it. And if there is a flame, don't snuff it out. Don't be brutal with it. Withdrawal can be a terrible thing when it keeps us awake at night, and watching others forget us sooner than we'd want to be forgotten is no better. We rip out so much of ourselves to be cured of things faster than we should that we go bankrupt by the age of 30 and have less to offer each time we start with someone new. But to feel nothing as to not feel anything, what a waste. And yeah, I could read this whole section because again, it is just so incredible. But in the book, this section ends with Elio realizing that his father is so much more and so much more complex, and there's just so much more to him than Elio ever realized. And so he vows to himself to ask his father about his father's life and to really get to know him. And I just love books and movies that either delve into this or just touch on this theme of children realizing that their parents are more than what they thought. I just think it's such a fascinating concept and such a fascinating thing to delve into, you know? But I feel like I need to talk about the peach scene, not for shock value, but because there is significance to this scene. Because in both book and movie, after they have been together that first night, during the daytime, we get a scene in both book and movie where Elio finishes inside of a peach. And this is one of those things that you would read in a book that I would be like, oh, like they won't possibly have that in the movie. But they do, they have it in the movie. And after he's done, Oliver later comes in and he sees what's in the peach. And in the movie, he's acting like he puts his finger in and he's acting like he's going to eat it. But Elio then is like begging him not to. And then he ends up beginning to cry, and then he hugs Oliver and he tells him how he doesn't want him to leave. Whereas in the book, Oliver comes in and he does end up eating the peach, and this causes Elio to cry because he says, no stranger had been so kind or gone so far from me. I'd never known so much gratitude, and there was no other way to show it. So he cries out of gratitude. Whereas in the movie, I mean, he was feeling these intense emotions and he's trying to stop Oliver, but also, you know, he's growing so attached to Oliver and knowing that he'll eventually leave. But in the book in particular, I felt like this scene, it reflected how Elio felt accepted by Oliver, because when Oliver walks in and sees the peach, Elio is like, like you think I'm sick, aren't I? And Oliver tells him like, oh, like, no, you're not sick. Like, I wish people were as sick as you. And so, you know, he had felt that self-loathing and disgust, right? Just that morning. And then now this thing with the peach, and then Oliver walks in and he's just feeling such disgust with himself. And so then the fact that Oliver not only is like, no, like you're not sick, but then he takes the extra step and eats the peach. And so then that makes Elio, again, he feels grateful because he feels accepted by Oliver, you know, and he feels like he's not the sick person. And so, yeah, I think it's that acceptance is the key thing that was going on there in the book in particular. But it's kind of funny in the book because in the moment with the peach, he's imagining like a backstory where this young prince or princess had been turned into a peach tree, and thousands of years later, they are finally able to experience pleasure now thanks to Elio. Yeah, just the backstory he gave to this peach I thought was pretty funny in the book. But a couple other changes I wanted to talk about. So in the book, there's this young woman, a young girl, I'm not sure her age. I think she was in her early teens or something. But she is friends with Elio and she becomes friends with Oliver, but she is like very smart and witty and clever. But turns out she is dying because she has like leukemia. And I didn't understand why she was in the book. She's just kind of this random character we never really delve into. And it also seemed like a cliche. The dying kid who's so smart and witty and matter of fact and not emotional about their impending death. And yeah, I didn't understand the point of her in the book, and I was fine with the movie taking her out. But then also to talk about Marzia. So this is the girl who had been friends with Elio, and then the two of them end up having sex a couple of times. And then in the book, Elio, he goes off to Rome. He does not say bye to her. And when she shows up to ask about Elio, this girl who you know, is sick and dying, she is there. And she kind of tells Marzia off and is pretty rude. And then we never hear of Marzia again. Whereas in the movie, when Elio comes back after Oliver has left, she comes up to Elio being like, hey, like, I want to stay friends, essentially. And they have this sweet moment. And so she was treated much better in the movie, and I was glad to see that. And then, yeah, like I said, we have that writer who we see multiple times in the book because Elio goes to see him. And then later, Oliver and Elio both are there at a reading of his. And he is the one that shares that Thailand story. And yeah, basically their time in Rome is a little different from book to movie. But yeah, this writer in particular, like, why did we get so much about him? Maybe there was something more there that I missed. Comment down below. But yeah, I was fine with the movie taking him out as well. But when it comes to book versus movie, as much as I love the writing of this book, and even though nearly everything that makes the movie great does come from the book, I have to say the movie wins because, again, they just adapted it so well and they brought this to life, and the acting was amazing and the cinematography, like I said. And I love that we also take our time. Like, there's so many scenes where we're just sitting with the scene and taking our time with it, which I absolutely loved. And again, just the ambiance that is created. Yeah, it was fantastic. And again, they also cut things that I was fine being cut. And then the change to Marzia, I liked. And sure, it would have been cool to see them reunite years later. Through the years, I did love that aspect of the book. And I also loved how in the book, he thinks about how Oliver has kind of become like this timestamp in his life. Like, oh, like that's someone I met after Oliver, or that's someone who I have known since before Oliver, and just how he just became this important part of his life timeline, you know? But even so, I think the movie ended at a good spot. And yeah, I just thought the movie was fantastic. And again, we don't get all of him obsessing over Oliver and all of his fantasies, so that definitely helped as well. I guess that wraps it up for my thoughts on Call Me By Your Name. I loved both, but the movie wins. So let me know your thoughts on the book and movie down below in the comments. And if you want more Timothee Chalamet content, I have covered both of the Dune movies, so I will link to both of those. I think he will get another Oscar nomination for Dune Part 2 because he was fantastic in that. But yeah, he's a great actor and he has a number of movies that are based on books. And so I will definitely be talking about him even more in the future. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and give this a thumbs up, and I will see you next time. Bye.